So you can keep your eyes shut or open, it's up to you. We're going to try and explore a little our direct experience. So let's use words to try and move beyond those same words. So as I apply words to the experience that we're sharing, they'll point us in certain directions. Attention will move around. So let's begin with, who am I? So consider, who am I in your experience? What might come up is a story, a narrative. It may contain concepts, ideas about who we are. We'll certainly be referring to the past. So if we set all of that aside, I was born here, the town I was born in, the things that I do, my experiences, the labels, my gender. If we reduce that down, all of those ideas will appear as thoughts and feelings, and a body, and a perspective, a perception of the world and life. When we reduce all that down, these are ideas, aren't they? So prior to any action or body or story or experiences that I've been through, are the thoughts about that, and are the ideas about that, and the concepts, and anything that we call memory, remembered experiences and events. But if we take that reduce it to its conclusion, we end up with the words themselves. So the answer to who am I at this point becomes, well, I'm a story, I'm a narrative, thoughts, feelings, sensations, and a perception. So we stay with that. Now, where do we experience thoughts? Where are thoughts experienced? Where are feelings experienced? Where does that sense of being a person, that sense of being me, where do I know that experience? Well, these thoughts and feelings about me don't happen outside the body, do they? They don't happen over there in the lorry that's going past, or in Billy's retreat house in Rishikesh in North India that he doesn't have. These ideas, I experience them in me, within me. I might say at first I experience them inside the body or in the mind, or ideas appear. Some are probably appearing now, they're arising. If that's the case, that thoughts and feelings are who I usually take myself to be, then if we take a pause here on the thinking infrastructure, the monkey mind, where do I go? What remains? So let's set aside the thinking paradigm. What remains? So that, whatever that is, remains. Now, we might say it's wordless, we might say it's formless, using our spiritual term. We might say silence, so we might apply a word to it in an attempt to describe it. Perhaps the word emptiness, it's sort of empty, there's an emptiness to the experience of being me, without the application of thought and feeling. I still seem to be a body. There seems to be a distinct vantage point from which I experience me and my view of the world. It seems to be like as if I've got this perception of experience. There's some concepts there and some ideas there. I think we can all say, I am here, or I am me, or even if we go before those words, we can experience and confirm, without the use of words, this sense of being here. We might say this sense of self. Here, when we use the word self, we would say this is with a capital S, a sense of clear self, not a complex miasma of remembered events, problems, images, happy events, troubles, intimacy. So that's all memory, isn't it? Let's not refer to memory. So there's this sense of an empty, yet somehow present and full of something we're struggling to name. The kind of energy, a kind of light to it. Experiencing. There is a sense of formless, objectless, peaceful self. Not doing anything, there's no doing attached to this experience. Yet for those of us that are used to this way of exploring being me, or you, or I, it's easier to identify the experience of being me at this absolute and inquired experience as being somewhat peaceful. There's so little activity. In fact, other than the sound of this voice, which is appearing and disappearing, or moving around the experience of this formless sense of peaceful self, true self. There's nothing difficult about it. One consistent movement right down at the bottom or the back of the experience of our peaceful present self is what might be by now a slight movement of the breathing function of the body. This is an outward movement, a rising and falling of this sense of self. And as it rises and falls, we can see very clearly that the sense of self is unchanged by it. The sense of self doesn't need the breathing function to be known. There's a point at the top and the bottom of the breathing function. momentarily, cyclically, where breathing stops very, very briefly. But this sense of self both remains, look for that for yourself, and the sense of self is unchanged, untarnished by the breathing function, as we've reduced our relationship to objects right down to bare-based breathing. So as we say, the breathing function seems to, at first we might say it seems to be happening inside of this sense of being me. We don't mean the body when we say inside, we mean inside our experience, or as a movement of experiencing. So experiencing is occurring, isn't it? I think we can all see experiencing is known. Look for yourself so you can confirm for yourself. Is there a knowing of experiencing, not the experiencing of things, but the knowing of experience as a continual, undivided thread, right at the pit or the core of the knowing, or of what is known. We are not the known. Being is known, experiencing is known, and knowing is one of the qualities of being. Let's just observe. If we use the word allowing, we'll now notice the presence of a sense of allowing of what is. But there's no person or personality who is allowing. There's no will applying a function called allowing. Allowing is one of the qualities of experiencing, of simply being. Nothing is harmful or adversely distracting, perhaps objects such as thoughts and feelings. Or even we might drift off into narratives about considerations on what's being said. But those considerations will point us back to the experience of what's being said. So we're continuing to stay right at this reduction of object relations, feeling our experience of being. Nameless, undivided, energetic, luminous peace. If we discover ourselves to be in a movement that takes us away from this, beyond the bottom of the breathing function, the basic breathing at the heart center of the body, Just use the breathing function, particularly as we breathe out once more, to sigh ourselves back down or into, or to sink into, allow our attention to sink back into itself and once more be knowingly. The known experiencing, known by no person, but knowing itself. Now this knowing experience of our self, capital S, we can see this is ever present, never absent. If we apply an idea, so we're going to put an image, we'll use our imagination, and we'll use words to trigger the imagination, just as some of these words perhaps are. So now there'll be a triggering of an idea called imagination. And we're going to place an object into the imagination. And we can only use the reference of memory of the words that are about to follow to summon the image that the words will describe. So at the moment there's perhaps an expectation and anticipation of what's going to be said. And notice when the words are said, the triggering of the memory of certain qualities of what we are being asked to imagine. So notice what happens. Let's breathe once more as our sense of self. Let go of the idea that there's about to be something to perfect or do. The words themselves will create the image. We might say imagination, we might say in our mind, we might say at a most elevated level as a movement of consciousness itself. We'll apply a remembered experience and certain concepts about what's said. So our statement is, don't think of a pink elephant. And what has appeared is some kind of pink elephant. We're seeing an image of an elephant. And uncharacteristically here, this is pink for each of us. We immediately recognize the futility of being asked not to think of this object. Now, somewhat allow that, So to some extent, allow for the holding, somewhat let the image float in experience, stay rooted firmly as the screen, the awareness in which the image is hung. There's no need, there's no will, there's no effort needed to allow it to hang there. This pink elephant we've been asked not to think of. The idea that we can apply any energy or effort to holding the image there is just a different thought, other than don't think of a pink elephant. So allow it to hang there. And abiding firmly as the knower of the experiencing of one's self with a capital S. It's as if the image is floating, perhaps floating. It's a remembered image, as we've said. It's pink. It's an elephant. I'm sure it looks different for many of us. But as we rest and abide and stay peacefully at the back as the screen, or as the observer of an imaginary screen we've just created, we notice that our sense of self is unchanged, should be, can be, ought to be, or find a place if not, where the sense of self, the awareness, the consciousness is unchanged by the image hanging. Or notice the presence of awareness in which an apparent, remembered, imaginative animal with a particular colour is hanging. So here, with the application of memory and thought, we've created an object that our attention has, for advancing seconds, become fixed upon. This is the nature of thought, of feeling, of sensation in the body. And for each of us there's a different perception. Perception itself is the same for everybody, it's the same phenomena. But of course, a remembered experience of elephants and of all life and of the colour pink will create distinct and subtle, or even extrovert, alterations in the nature of the pink elephant. But it is merely a thought, a remembered experience, or several experiences, summoned by the new experience of the words, "Don't think of a pink elephant." And here we are, doing exactly that. Because thoughts create. They certainly create feelings, and then the feelings create further thoughts. Perception, as governed by memory and prior experience, mould what we conceptualize. And then in the body there's a sensation as a result of the creation made by thoughts and feelings. Maybe some of us have had bad experience or negative experiences of elephants. They trampled through our village. Or maybe some of us have had fantastic experiences of elephants when we went to Guttermonk B's imaginary retreat house in Rishikesh, which was also an imaginary elephant sanctuary. So there you go, there's a whole panoply of objects and images created there. Real or imagined experiences of some imaginary retreat house that I keep mentioning. Imagine what a retreat house might look like. It's in the snowy mountains of northern India, a spiritual nexus that is Rishikesh. Because of the cultural variables that we know from memory, maybe that defines the architecture that we're seeing. There's Billy at the doorstep, Guttermonk B at the doorstep, welcoming us, using prayer hands and saying namaskaran to us, using a local variant for namaste. And now notice, here we are after this slight dialogue, nowhere near somewhere we're about to go back to, which is the pink elephant, where once more we've applied the words, and there it is, we're back at the elephant. And now let's go back to the retreat house in the imaginary space in Rishikesh in North India. And notice the sense of self, the peaceful screen on which these images and concepts and thoughts and feelings and perceptions have interchangeably moved around. That sense of experiencing, whether it was the words and the thoughts and the feelings, the images, the imagination, or the experiencing in which or as which these concepts and these colours and elephants and buildings and architecture came and are by now falling away once more. Let's use our sighing mechanism. Let's tenderly, lovingly breathe back down and allow for the letting go of the idea of letting go. Set aside imagination, objects in imagination. There's an apparent return to something that we never really left. Attention was just diverted by the application of thought, concept, colour and creature. Yet those notions all rose out of the application of language, thoughts, memory. Exist, in fact, only in there. We can do this with the objects of the human experience. If we now say the body, then the very body that we've taken ourselves to be for decades has now appeared as an idea out of the application of words and thoughts and concepts. But all this time, without the application of the phrase, the body has not been in our experience. We were reduced down from such a concept as a body, even a mind, and we found ourselves at the heart of the experience of experiencing, and knew only and know only experiencing itself. After decades of the monkey mind, the thinking infrastructure, the hierarchical nature of mental chatter, small wonder if there's a sense of wanting to think, not simply the next thought, but a whole cavalcade of thoughts. About what's being said. So allowing ourselves to arrive somewhere we had not left. The most subtle of seeming swathes or movements from nothing to nothing. Let's arrive back at that sense of self, of me, of here, of presence, of awareness, consciousness, in which even the body and the mind have been left aside as ideas, the same as any other idea. So eschewing all of that. Let's ask ourselves, or let's notice our response to the consideration. The consideration offered for you to ask for yourself, to silently acknowledge your answer, to know the experience that confirms the consideration. Notice where you are, what you are, who you are, and how you are. Upon the application of the inquiry, am I? Stay with that, abide as that, abide with and in and as this, which that is confirmation of. And this is our starting point for constant, gracefully given, lovingly offered experience. Bring this to the world in such a bad state, so in need of this simple offering. That all activity seeks to find, that we here realize we have never lost. You are this.